Good Saturday morning to everybody, and welcome to HyperFit MD, where age management is always front and center, along with Dr. Charles and Francesca Guglin. I'm Gary Byron. Hey, brother, how are you? Nice to see you.
We're good.
Good. Nice to see you as well, Francesca. How was your week?
Great. Really good.
Yeah?
Thank you. Yeah.
We're waiting for spring to get off its butt and start doing something.
Oh,
We need
man.
the sun.
Right. And warmth.
Right.
You get these warm days every now and then, and very unseasonably
It's a
warm.
tease.
Yeah, and I was going to say, as a doc, is there truth to the fact that's how you get sick, right? Because the up and down, the roller coaster of temperatures.
Well, I guess if you're outside naked, it might be a problem for you. But I'm not a big believer. Benjamin Franklin used to take air baths, right? He used to open up the windows and stand in front of his window naked.
There's a vision.
This isn't a vision, yeah. In as much as bad weather can be stressful and can make us prone to illness, yeah, I'm a believer. But I don't think that cold air essentially makes you sick.
I think it's more your mental health.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
There's a whole other issue.
Yeah.
A dose of sunshine makes everybody feel better.
We could do a whole show and have a part 2.
Yeah.
On mental health. That might not be a bad topic in the near future, particularly in what we're living through right now.
I'd love to do it, but I'll have to bring an expert.
That's fine.
I'm no expert.
No. That's fine. But I mean, that's a serious component.
I'm not even expert on my own mental health.
Who is?
Right.
Even these docs aren't. It's like the shoes. It's like the shoe repairman who's got terrible shoes.
They're the most messed up.
The landscaper with the who hasn't mowed his own lawn in weeks. Right?
That's right. Yeah.
This morning, we're going to talk about hair restoration. You've teased about this topic in the past, and I'm so glad that we're able to cover this because this is something that a lot of men and even several women have to endure, whether it's genetic, and there's just been long-standing, myth where you get it from your father, or you get it from your father's brother, you get it from your uncle, and I can tell you that my mom is Irish and has straight hair. My father is Sicilian Italian and has curly hair. He's in his late 70s now. It's thinned out. He's got a little, bald spot on his crown there, and it's not as curly. It's very, very, very wavy.
Yeah.
But when I look at pictures, when I remember my dad earlier, in his life, and with the darker hair, he
probably
had
looked like a wolf man, right?
We had dark curly hair, So I get my curly hair from my dad. So there goes, getting it from your uncle.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, you must have heard similar things.
It's like everything in genetics. It's a multifactorial event. The myth is that if you look at your mother's brothers, or if your mother's father, you get a good idea. Of what your hair destiny is. But I'm a classic example. All my mother's brothers lost their hair by the time they were in their 40s. My dad died with a full head of hair.
Oh, look at that!
I'm 65, and I have pretty much a full head of hair.
Why do men and women? Why do they lose hair?
There's lots of different reasons.
Stress, right?
Well, there's that, and we're going to talk about that. It's called telegenic effluvium. But the main reason people lose hair is what's called androgenic alopecia. Both men and women who are genetically sensitive to dihydrotestosterone, which is a testosterone metabolite, have certain hair follicles on your scalp, and the distribution is classic male pattern baldness, are sensitive to DHT. And as we get older, that sensitivity results in thinning of those hairs and then atrophy of the hair follicles. There are autoimmune diseases. One of them is alopecia areata, which is an autoimmune disorder, which tends to cause patchy hair loss. Telegenic effluvium, which is what you made reference to, stress hair loss, is probably the second most common reason I see people, especially with COVID. There's a very significant subset of people who caught COVID, especially the Delta variant.
And lost hair.
And lost their hair big time.
But does that grow back?
Yeah. Over time, we've realized that it does grow back. Francesca's a classic example. We had back in May of 2020, we had a horrible case of COVID.
The original COVID,
Yeah, the
yeah.
original one. We had to close our practice for a month because we were both so sick from it. And I think in September and October, her hair started falling out by the handful. And
See all the short
she
hairy shorts.
lost it, man. She lost her hair and she lost it at the same
Were
time.
you wondering if it was ever going to grow back? We
Oh,
must
I
have been
was
scared.
Freaking out.
Yeah, she was freaking out. And by was probably February or March of the next year, we started seeing little spikes of hair coming up all
Yeah,
over her
it's coming-
scalp.
it's come back.
Yeah,
So
come
it took a
back fully.
year, though.
No, it took about 6 months, probably.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is classic because it's about how long it takes for a hair follicle to wake up and start growing hair as a 4 to 6 month period of time. So lots of different reasons for losing your hair. The very far and away the most common is androgenic alopecia. Post menopause, women's hair thins out naturally over time. The cure for that is estrogen, frankly. Post andropause, men tend to, like apropos of your dad, whose hair thinned out as he got older. As your testosterone levels drop off, your hair tends to thin out also. So it's an age-related phenomenon as well.
How do you then? All right, let's say somebody. I come into your practice. How do you evaluate me? Who comes in maybe complaining of hair loss? Do you run your fingers through their hair? Are you looking for
Eventually.
Well, you got to buy me dinner first.
That's right.
Take me through the steps of an evaluation for this.
We do take a family history.
Okay.
Because, like I said, it's a multifactorial event. It is very much, in most people, genetically determined whether or not you're going to lose your hair at a certain age. So we do take a family history, talk to them about their own personal health history, what medications they're on, critical, what medications they're currently on, whether they are in a time of life where they're super stressed for one reason or another, if they just had a divorce, okay, or they lost a family member. Lots of different things that can cause stress that can result in hair loss. So we talk about all those things. So take a really a deep medical history on them, and then run my fingers through their hair. I mean, you got to take a look at it and see what the pattern of hair loss is. Look at the skin of the scalp. Frequently, I'll send somebody off to a dermatologist. I don't do the biopsies myself, but if I think somebody needs a scalp biopsy, I'll send them off to a dermatologist for a scalp biopsy. If I think it's some kind of autoimmune disorder or some kind of fungus or something like that, we'll get them biopsied to get a pathologic look at have a pathologist look at the skin, and then once we kind of know where it's coming from, we give them advice. If it looks like it's something that's stress related, I say, look, here's some topical stuff, whatever. That to accelerate the regrowth of your hair, but my opinion is that your hair is going to come back. So let's just do nothing right now.
When you say topical, are you talking creams? Are you talking Propecia? Are you talking minoxidil? Are you talking what?
All of the above. The first thing I talked to everybody about is last week we had Neil Carcusa in here from Metagenics. They don't offer any hair products, but there are really good supplements out there. They're basically Ayurvedic medicine. I mean, they are supplements that enhance hair regrowth. I'll spare you the trade names, but there's a few of them that really work. Randomized prospective science clearly shows that if you take their supplements on a regular basis, you will get regrowth of hair, typically in the crowning area. Supplements are really good for the crowning area.
That's a heck of a claim, though.
Yeah, I know it is.
Because, I mean,
it's not,
that would be all over the front page news.
it's very supportive. I'm not saying that it results in the kind of hair regrowth that you talk about with the other pharmaceuticals, okay? But if you don't want to touch a pharmaceutical, but you want to support the hair that you currently have, a nutraceutical is a good way to go. Finasteride is a pill that you take once a day that basically decreases the level of DHT in your bloodstream. So dihydrotestosterone is the hormone that your hair follicles are sensitive to that causes hair loss and androgenic alopecia. So finasteride decreases the levels of DHT in the bloodstream, and therefore will slow hair loss, and actually can result in regrowth of hair. Minoxidil you spoke about, that can be taken by mouth or topically. That desensitizes your hair follicles to DHT. Basically, it's all about working on your scalp sensitivity to DHT, dihydrotestosterone. with alopecia areata, which is an autoimmune disorder, you're talking steroids, cortisol, probably a mixture of something topical like minoxidil. There's several other second and third generation versions of minoxidil, and a steroid like cortisol, or to basically tamp down the immune response to that follicle. If it's an autoimmune disorder, cortisol is part of the treatment as well. So a lot of it depends on the diagnosis.
So it sounds like, I mean, there are medicines that work to restore hair.
For instance, a woman with PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome. One of the symptoms of polycystic ovary syndrome is hair loss. Those women tend to have very high testosterone levels. So spironolactone, which is a diuretic basically, but one of the side effects of spironolactone is it drops, anybody who takes it drops their serum testosterone levels. And so a woman with PCOS who has lots of circulating testosterone, you put them on spironolactone and it will slow down hair loss. And actually, PCOS is a huge range of severity of PCOS. But a lot of these women will get regrowth of their hair also. So lots of different ways of skinning the cat. Depends upon what the cat is.
No, it does sound like there's a variety of way of treating hair loss. But you'll forgive me, I hope, in some of my skepticism.
Yeah, sure.
As far as whether half of these even work.
They're not miracles. They're not miracles. And if you had a full head of hair when you were 18, it's never going to get you back there.
No, I understand that. And I don't think that's what anybody would have. Those are unrealistic expectations.
Right.
I think it's just not being bald or having a bald spot. Mm-hmm. To fill in where you're either thinning or where there's a deficit.
Yeah.
I think is what most people would be pleased, not to have the full head of hair that when they were 18. In fact, I'd probably look really funny if I had the same full head of hair when I was 18, or the same hairline even.
Right. Exactly.
What if you're taking minoxidil? What if you're taking Propecia? And there was another big one there too that people were buying for a while. It was like one of the first ones on the market. Rogaine. Thank you.
Yeah.
Rogaine.
I was blanking on that word too.
You're taking Rogaine or any of these other medications, and then all of a sudden you abruptly stop.
That's the problem.
Because I would imagine it gets expensive.
Everything, yeah. If you want to maintain hair growth into old age, virtually every treatment that's out there, including platelet-rich plasma, which we do in the practice also, gets very pricey over time. There's only one, right now, currently, there's only one way of permanently getting hair growing in those areas, and that's with hair transplantation.
All right, so then let's talk about that. It sounds an invasive way to deal with hair loss, though.
Depends on what you see when you look in the mirror and how much it bothers you. It is invasive. I mean, it's a procedure. The way we do it in our practice is called follicular unit extraction. The transplantation techniques have evolved over time. We've all heard about plugs. Everybody comes into my practice wants to make sure that I'm not going to do plugs on them.
Well, because they look obvious. I remember
right.
Joe Biden had plugs in the late 80s.
He looked like a Barbie doll.
Yeah, he did. He looked ridiculous.
Yeah. And that's from the 50s and 60s and maybe 70s. I don't really know when the whole plug thing stopped, but they then evolved into what we call the strip method, where you take a strip of hair from the back of the head and then sew that area closed, and then you hand dissect out the hair follicles and you transplant them one by one.
I think that's the procedure, and I'm not going to mention brand names here, but I think that's the procedure that most people, when they hear hair transplants, they think of exactly right. Because of the infomercials in the 90s and the early 2000s that were so prevalent. Yeah. I mean, they were well produced, 28-minute, little, mini shows, and it was exactly that. It was taking a strip in an area that was really thick, and then that was the donor area, and then you see the guy come out of the swimming pool. He's running his fingers through his hair, and he goes, "Look, it's my hair."
Right.
No, it's not. It's not like it's no. This is not a wig. It's not a toupee. It's not someone else. This is my hair, and look, it's growing. And it's like, wow, that's pretty wild. And I didn't mean to cut you off, Doc,
No.
but I had to interject that there because when people think of hair transplants, I don't think as many people are as familiar with this new wave of procedure. I think they think of the strip automatically.
Right.
Go ahead, please.
No, right. And there are still practices there. Excuse me. There's still practices that will use that method. What we do in our practice is what's called follicular unit extraction, where we're taking out single hair follicles at a time. So there's no scar. The thing about the strip method is you get good results, but it leaves a scar. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you that in our practice, a couple of times we've actually transplanted hair into one of those scars. It leaves a scar. It's fairly painful first few days postoperatively, and one of the principal tenets of surgery. One of the first things you learn when you're a surgeon is to never suture anything under tension because it will always give away over time. So the wounds get complicated after a while. And they can look beautiful for the first 6 months or a year, but over time, they do wind up spreading. And the male aesthetic is most guys are keeping their hair fairly short these days, and so the scar shows. Follicular unit extraction, you're taking out single hair follicles at a time. You're distributing where you're taking those follicles out. The rule of thumb is you don't want to. What we do at the beginning of the procedure is we use a little magnifying glass that shows us a square centimeter of the scalp, and we actually count the hair follicles in that square centimeter. You don't want to take more than 15% of hair follicles in any square centimeter because then the donor site starts to look a little bit ratty. So the whole idea is maintaining the donor site so that it looks like you've had nothing done back there. And also another thing that happens with the strip method is guys who've had 2 or 3 of those procedures, you don't realize this, but the hairline and the back, the hairline in the back rides up because you're pulling this up, pulling it up, pulling it up. So you have, a couple of guys this practice have come to our practice have had 2 of these strip procedures, and so this hairline here is way up higher in their neck because it's been pulled up over time. So you can see it where it's been done. Follicular unit extraction, if it's done well, you don't see. There's no scar. There's nothing back.
You're
there.
just plucking. Help me visualize this. You're plucking.
The machine
hair
that we
from...
use is like a spinning microtome. It's literally a cylindrical scalpel. It's about 1 millimeter wide. That under magnification, you're visualizing the hair follicle, and you're drilling down on that follicle, and then there is a suction apparatus that sucks the follicle into a bath that's bathed in saline, and it's oxygenated the whole time. So the grafts are very viable. Which also speaks to the strip method because you're hand dissecting out those follicles. The take rate of the follicles is lower, maybe 85, 90%. Whereas with follicular unit extraction, those follicles are nice and healthy when you transplant them. So the take rate is much higher. It's between 95 and 98% for the most part.
And I know that the head is numbed prior to this, right? I would imagine. This otherwise. Yeah. And are you just poking through the scalp and implanting them,
right?
But you're not implanting the entire, like a strand of hair.
No, it's a single follicle.
A single follicle,
right? And each follicle grows 1, 2, or 3, sometimes 4 hairs. And so, after we take the grafts, after the techs take the grafts, the patient has some lunch with Francesca and I, while the techs are separating the grafts into those 1, 2, and 3 hair follicles because we use the 1 hair follicles for the hairline. And we use the more robust follicles to fill in further back.
Folks, you're listening to HyperFit MD, where age management is always front and center, along with Dr. Charles and Francesca Guglin. I'm Gary Byron. You can always check out their website at hyperfitmd.com and write down this phone number if this sounds interesting to you. 203-890-9777. I'll repeat those points of contact as well as an email address as we get a little bit later into the show. How long will it take before someone starts to finally see some growth?
Good question. Many of the follicles, when transplanted, go into what's called shock. You get what's called shock loss. They lose the hair that's in the follicle, and then it regrows over time. I tell patients don't expect to see the full result for 10 months.
Oh,
Yeah.
that long.
You start to see ingrowth fairly soon, within a month or two, of individual follicles over time. We have patients come in, the ones who live locally, excuse me, the ones who live locally, we have them come in at least once a week for an LED light treatment because blue light is bacteriostatic, and near infrared light speeds up what's called neovascularization, or new blood supply to those follicles. So you tend to see the follicles sprout earlier if they're coming in weekly for those treatments. But yeah, 4 months or so, you start to see significant ingrowth. You start to see real length at 6-8 months, somewhere in there. But certainly by 10 months, every follicle that you transplanted should be growing.
And how long will it last?
If let's say
Will
we
you
grab,
continue to lose your hair?
well, that's the point. Let's say we graft somebody like you, okay? Let's say that you're one of those guys who comes to me in their 30s and they're losing their hair.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like if you look at the way the pattern of their hair loss, it looks like they're destined to be significantly a bald man by the time they get older. I tell them, plan on 2 procedures. Let's fill in where you've got now, and then let's see what level of hair loss you sustain over the next 15 years or so, okay? And if you're destined to lose more of that hair, you're going to want to come back for a second procedure at some point.
How much? Like a couple of years later, or?
Well, you don't want to jump the gun on it. You want to see where you're destined to go over time. So you definitely should wait some time before you talk about a second procedure.
Is there a way of permanently restoring your hair?
That's the only way,
That's it.
as far as I know. As far as I know.
But the hair that you replace is not ever going to fall off.
It's the hair that you didn't replace that
Exactly.
Right.
and hence the reason for a possible
Exactly.
second procedure.
Right, yeah. Yeah, so as far as I know, I'm convinced that sometime, maybe not in our lifetime, but in the lifetime of our children, they're going to figure out how to grow hair follicles in vitro.
Yeah.
Take a couple of your follicles, and then 8 months later you come back and there's 5,000 of them sitting in a petri dish.
Is microneedling effective here?
Yeah, it works. When I do platelet-rich plasma, we do platelet-rich plasma infusions for hair loss in the practice. When we do that procedure, I always add in microneedling. It's kind of a belt and suspenders approach to it, because we talked about this when we were talking about the Morpheus 8 last week. Through injury, you get ingrowth of collagen and new blood supply into an area. So just minor injury like microneedling will bring new blood supply and revitalize follicles that may be getting tired. So it's very helpful.
Is there any difference between a man and a woman in hair loss and the procedure that they would endure to regrow?
Yeah.
Is the procedure is it the same? Are the drugs or the supplements, are they the same or are they different?
The pattern of hair loss between men and women is different. Women tend to retain their hairline but lose hair starting right in the middle going down this way. I know this is radio, but it's a different pattern of hair
You're
loss.
talking in the middle of your head.
Yeah, towards the middle of the head. But they tend to retain their hairline, and women are experts at hiding hair loss. It's unbelievable. Sometime a woman will come into the practice and it'll look right off the bat. You look at her and say, what she's doing here, and then she'll move something around, and you realize that she's lost a lot of hair. The procedure is the same. The nutraceuticals that we use are the same. The topical stuff are basically the same. So the treatment for the most part is the same. Platelet-rich plasma works in women.
What's the aftercare like? Okay, so you've had the procedure, and what do you tell the patient to then do? What does that entail?
The first 5 days or so, we want them. Basically, it's intuitive. The whole idea is not to dislodge the grafts. So we want them sleeping at 45 degrees. A recliner is a good place to sleep for the first couple of days. Don't want them washing their hair in a shower. We give them a bottle of baby
the pressure
shampoo.
could remove them.
Yeah,
All right, okay.
We give them a bottle of baby shampoo, and we say we want somebody to use a cup of water in a sink to gently bathe that area. For nothing for the first couple
I'd be
of days.
afraid at all. I'd be like, I'll just go a few days without washing my hair.
Well, you do. I mean, there's scabs and everything else. You do want to clean that area up.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't want them wearing a hat for a good 10 days or so, and then after that they can wear a loose baseball hat. We give them a couple of OR caps to wear, a few OR caps to wear. as we were talking about before we started the show here, the donor site hides itself pretty well within 7 to 10 days. You don't realize how fast that hair grows back there until you cut it really short, and the donor site becomes pretty much invisible within 10 days to a couple of weeks. And then the recipient site, it looks a little scabby for the first week or so. Once those scabs fall off, you can't tell.
Yeah,
Then
because
you
most
just wait
people
for
who
the
get
hair to
this
grow back.
procedure, they don't want everybody to know, hey, guess what I had done,
Yeah, right.
So when you go back to work the next day, it might look a little obvious.
Yeah, I tell people if you do it
3
on a
days.
Wednesday, you can be back to work on a Monday or Tuesday. But you know what? Cosmetic and aesthetic surgery these days, the tab, it's not taboo anymore, And if all of a sudden, you're a semi-bald guy and you start having hair growing, people are going to know anyway.
Yeah, eventually. That's a good point.
It's,
All right, so what's the damage here? What could something like this cost?
I can tell you, we charge $6 a graft.
$6 a graft. And on the average person has 2,500 grafts, 3,000 grafts?
Whatever they need.
Whatever they need. It's customized then.
Right.
That's
Customized.
good to hear.
Yeah. Some people just want to have the. Some people, like if you're there, I had a kid in the office the other day. He's 6'3". No one's ever going to see the top of his head. You know what I mean? Unless he's sitting in a chair. And he was really more interested in making his hairline more substantial. So somebody like that, 1,000 grafts, he's perfectly happy with it. We can do up to 3,500 grafts in a single day. But to a large degree, it depends on how much money you're willing to throw at it. Because to a very large degree, the number of grafts that you pay for improves the result that you get.
Of course. And I would imagine, is the person there all day or most of the afternoon?
Yeah,
All
it's
day.
an all-day thing. Yeah. Okay. They take some Valium before they come in, so they kind of sleep through the whole thing.
Do they really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You have to be driven.
You got to be driven to and from the procedure. Yeah.
Wow.
Because it's a mild sedation. It's oral Valium that they take before. So
Interesting. All right.
because it is a long day if you're not a little bit sedated. Yeah.
Folks, check them out online, hyperfitmd.com. Once again, hyperfitmd.com. If you'd like to send Dr. Charles Guglin an email, very easy to do. It's cguglinmd at hyperfitmdamc.com. I'll repeat that for you. I know it's a little wordy here. cguglinmd, so cguglinmd at hyperfitmdamc.com. Write down their phone number as well. Make an appointment. At least get the ball rolling. I'm sure you have a lot of questions and maybe inquiry here. 203-890-9777. Just at least inquire. 203-890-9777. And of course, they're located on 88 Noble Avenue, Suite 105 in Milford. For Dr. Charles and Francesca Guglin, I'm Gary Byron. Thank you so much for listening to HyperFit MD, where age management is always front and center. Until next Saturday, have a good one, everybody.